Hi friends, welcome back. You've seen me cover quite a few mostly routine things on this channel since my first video back in August. You see where my money goes when I get my paycheck, you've seen me do things I shouldn't have, and you've seen what is mostly progress up until this point. What you haven't seen is an overview of my assets or my actual net worth. I was cringing when I made my debt confession video, and I'm cringing in a different way now. There are parts of this that I'm obviously not proud of, and there are parts of this that help me feel much more positive than many people probably would if they were carrying the amount of consumer debt that I have. I want to cover those things so that you know where I stand, and so that hopefully some of the goals that I set on my 2026 bingo board will make more sense. I'm filming this about a week ahead of when you're seeing it, so it's missing my paycheck that is coming tomorrow. You'll see that video before you see this one. The credit card balances are also as of my most recent statement dates, so they're not entirely accurate, but I'd rather use the reported amount than give you something that isn't taking interest into account, which makes things look significantly better than they actually are. If I had filmed this 2 weeks ago, I would have had multiple thousands of dollars more in cash than I do now, but that's life and it is what it is. Let's get into my assets, and more specifically, my bank accounts. I have accounts at 3 banks. One is the bank that my parents use, where my primary checking account is and where I've been baking since I got my first debit card at 14. One is where I keep my high yield savings, including my emergency fund. I have a few accounts there for various sinking funds, but I lumped those together for reasons you'll see momentarily. The last is the credit union that I belong to, where I have both a checking account that I currently use specifically for my horse and a savings account that does nothing. Starting with my primary bank, my accounts are split between checking, short-term savings, which has no restrictions on the number of withdrawals that I can make, but a much lower interest rate, and long-term savings, which limits me to 6 withdrawals per month, and used to have a terrible interest rate until seemingly everyone moved their money out to high-yield accounts and the bank decided to offer over 3%. In these savings accounts, I can set up different buckets and assign my money to them, so they're pretty similar to some of the high-yield accounts that I see some people referencing as their favorites on Personal Finance YouTube, but this is not one of those banks. My checking account currently has a grand total of $342.48 in it. This is pretty typical for the last day or two before my next paycheck as things currently stand, and it's going to be less than that after I sit down this evening and make some other credit card payments. My short-term savings has $175.60 in it, which is basically all for my cats. That's where that $50 transfer goes every paycheck. My long-term savings has $725.72 in it, which is mostly from my car insurance premium that I pay every 6 months. This way I can earn interest on it in between, as opposed to lump summing all of it out of one paycheck. My horse checking account at my credit union currently has $626.77 in it. About $300 of that should be disappearing in the next week or so once I get my vet bill for last weekend's vet visit. The credit union savings account has $51.30 in it. This is the $50 that I transferred when I opened the account, plus the interest that I've earned on it. Moving on to the bank where I keep my high yield savings, my sinking funds currently have a combined total of $54.96 in them. These are for things like vacation and my house down payment fund, so you can see how well that's going. If they actually had meaningful balances in them, I would separate them out, but obviously they do not. At some point in the future, hopefully they will. I'll resume contributing to these once my debt situation is less painful. In 2024, I had a pretty decent sum of money stashed here, but I ended up using most of it when I lost my job because that was obviously a significantly bigger problem. My emergency fund also sadly has next to nothing in it right now, with a whopping total of $58.56, since I used most of it toward my car repairs last week so it could pass inspection. I couldn't bring myself to clear every penny out, so I left, obviously, $50 plus a little bit. I'll be targeting this pretty aggressively starting tomorrow so that I can build some savings back up here and give myself a buffer again. But in the meantime, that's what it is. In total, I have $2,035.39 to my name in my bank accounts as far as liquid funds go. That is pathetic and kind of scary. Moving on to what helps me sleep at night, my investments. When I make reference to the fact that things could be so much worse for me, this is what I mean. I will not have my full salary saved in my retirement by the age of 30. I will be 30 in July this year. but I have as much saved as I was making 2 years ago, and as I outlined in my bingo board, I should have over $100,000 saved by the end of the year, depending on what the market decides to do. I say that because, if you were wondering, I do think AI is mostly a bubble and we're all going to suffer when it bursts, but that's a conversation for a different time. My 401k balance as of yesterday was $86,819.50. The biweekly contribution to my 401k, including my employer match, is $380.77 at my current salary, which is almost $10,000 a year. So in theory, between that and the market return, provided the bubble doesn't pop in 2026, I should have no issue clearing $100,000 by the end of the year. I also have $67.79 in investments outside of my retirement, which I mentioned in my bingo board video. This is $50 that I shoved into a green ETF in August of 2024 through Fidelity, plus the returns on that. I picked that ETF for shits and giggles, not to be investing seriously. Once I get my raise, I'm hoping to start contributing to this on a biweekly basis. I don't want to be investing outside of my retirement in things that include fossil fuels and stuff like that. We really need to pivot away from that as a planet, so that's why I picked the ETF that I did. I wanted to see how that would perform relative to the rest of the market. Can't give you any insight on that right now because I have not been following it closely enough, but it's here. It exists. Then we come to my RSUs, which is restricted stock units for those who are not familiar with the initialism. I was granted a set number of shares by my company when I was hired, which vest 1/3 per year over 3 years. So what you see here is my first set of vested shares. I was also granted a bonus of 7% of my salary in shares at the beginning of the summer last year, which also vest 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So I should see the first set of those hit in June or July. I can't remember exactly when the grant date was, but it's somewhere in there. Once my shares vest, they're ordinary common stock, just like any retail investor would buy. The current value of my vested shares at the time of filming is $6,540.85. I do need to do some tax planning related to this for 2026. As a brief overview, when shares vest, the value of the shares on that date is treated as ordinary income for tax purposes, just like everything else reported on your W-2. There's a few different ways that the remittance of the taxes can be handled. My company takes the approach of withholding and selling a set number of shares on my behalf to cover state and local taxes, FICA withholding, which is Medicare and Social Security, and federal taxes at a marginal rate of 22%. If anything is owed beyond that, it's my responsibility to remit the additional tax to the government. Based on our current stock price, it's likely that my shares vesting this year will push my adjusted gross income into the 24% marginal bracket. In order to get ahead of that, I'm probably going to modify my withholding once I get my raise to have payroll withhold some additional money for tax from each paycheck and remit it on my behalf, because I really do not feel like having to make estimated quarterly payments or having a big tax bill when I do my return in 2027. We will cross that bridge when we get to it. After that detour, my total investment amount is $93,428.14. My last asset is my car. I bought it used in 2018. It's a 2016 model year, and it's been paid off since 2022. I paid it off about 4 months early before so many things about my finances went completely off the rails. Monarch would tell you it's worth roughly $13,000. Kelley Blue Book and J.D. Power both put the trade-in value somewhere between $4,500 and $6,500, so I'm just calling it $5,000 here to keep it simple. In total, that brings my assets to $100,463.53. Moving on to my liabilities, which all of you are almost as familiar with as I am, we have the following. 5 credit cards, which I report on regularly. You get an update in basically every paycheck video. As of the most recent statement dates, their balances are Chase, $15,766.86. Discover Balance Transfer, $5,133.14. Discover Chrome, $25,681.91. My bank Visa, which is through my primary bank, $21,806.51. My credit union Visa, $2,203.33. In total, that is $70,591.72 owed on credit cards. We also have my outstanding Affirm balance for my sewing machine, which is now $207.04. That will be paid off in April. In total, my liabilities are $70,798.79. If you're doing the math at home, which you probably are not, that is a total reduction of $3,872.10 since my debt confession video, or 5.19% of the total balance. As I say every time I give one of these updates, it's obviously not ideal, and I would love it if the change was bigger than that. But it is honestly not too bad for what is essentially 4 months of debt payments. You may notice the glaring lack of student loans in that liability number if you're new here. That's because I owed less than $20,000 when I graduated, courtesy of my dad being faculty at my university. I paid those off in April of 2025, which was technically 3 years early since I was on the 10-year repayment plan. It would have been sooner, but I stopped paying on them for a while during the pause in favor of paying off my car and a few other things since those were still accruing interest. That brings my total net worth in at $29,664.74, which is kind of wild when you think about the amount of debt that I'm in. What's even more wild is what that number would be if I wasn't in debt, or at least nowhere near as much of it. I can't say exactly how often I'm going to provide updates on this because on a month-by-month basis, they really aren't that useful, but I'm thinking every 6 months or so, because I talk a lot about my debt balances mostly going down, but not so much about what that means for everything else. So I think it'll be good to get a bigger picture on occasion. As always, thanks to everyone who has liked and commented and subscribed. I'm officially a quarter of the way to this channel being monetized in terms of both subscribers and watch time, which I did not think would come so quickly. So that is pretty cool. And hopefully I will get to check off that bingo square in 2026. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys next week for another paycheck budget, which is going to be 2 paychecks from now when I'm filming this. Having these out of order is so weird. No one's home, so I had to take the opportunity. We're all over the place here. See you guys in the next one. Bye.